This is Modifications and Waivers presented by the Mod King. Please consult well ahead of time with your CDBG grants manager regarding any of the proposed changes, including at least 1 to 2 months ahead of time for any potential end-date extension modification requests. Modifications are not allowed for activities outside of the original project area as defined in the grant agreement, or to increase or decrease the scope of work or budget due to increased or decreased estimated project costs from the time of grant application. Also, no modifications will be entertained that would alter the LMI benefit to reduce it below the HUD mandated 51% or greater LMI benefit. Waivers are modifications to an expired grant agreement to be avoided if at all possible because they cause extra work for you as the grant administrator, for the grantee, and for those of us at DCO. Please consult with your grant manager 1 to 2 months before grant expiration if a modification is to be sought to that expiring grant, especially if the modification would result in an end date extension. You may need to consult earlier than 2 months if the expiration of the grant runs from June 30th to August 31st to avoid delays during the state's annual fiscal year rollover period. Unapproved changes to a grant award can result in the repayment of grant funds. Modifications of an expired grant may not be allowed at the department's discretion, so please always contact your grant manager prior to changing a CDBG funded grant project in any way. After an initial phone or email consultation initiated by the grant administrator, the CDBG grant manager will determine if a written modification or waiver request is required and potentially acceptable. The grant manager will consult internally with their program manager and potentially our deputy director regarding the appropriateness of the request. If a mod request is deemed to be appropriate, the grant manager will advise the grant administrator to submit the modification request via emailed documents. After receipt of those documents, the grant manager will initiate the modification on DCO's and, if applicable, HUD's financial systems. Once DCO's legal counsel has approved the mod request, the grant manager will send the grant administrator the new GATA required grant modification agreement for signature by an authorized designee or the authorized signatory listed in the grant agreement, who will return it to the grant manager via an emailed PDF. Once the modification or waiver is executed by DCO Accounting and the State Comptroller, the grant manager will email a PDF copy to the grant administrator for their records and for providing a copy to the grantee community. The first document required for a modification or waiver request is a letter signed by the grantee's chief elected official on the grantee's letterhead, detailing why changes are necessary, what changes need to be performed, and including the grant number. The second required document for a CDBG modification or request is the new DCO CDBG modification waiver information sheet, completed as indicated with no signature required or desired. Budget modification requests require a completed GATA budget modification template, CDBG version, signed and dated by the grantee's chief elected official and the grantee's treasurer or clerk. If the treasurer or clerk positions are simultaneously vacant and or on leave of absence, then a member of the grantee's legislative body may co-sign the certification page along with the chief elected official. The grant manager will determine if proposed changes, including changes to the line items at Exhibit B of the grant agreement, would require a scope of work modification. If so, the grant manager will prepare a revised scope to include in the grant modification packet and will email a copy to the grant administrator for their records and will check the scope box on the mod waiver information sheet if the administrator did not already check it. A revised project location map is required for changes of site locations within the environmentally cleared and grant agreement approved project area. The project location map must clearly indicate proposed locations to be added and proposed locations to be deleted. For grant agreements with an LMI connections line item, the grantee community may attempt via modification to move unspent LMI connection funds to the grant's construction line item if, after 2 attempts to reach local LMI households, the grantee was unable to document a sufficient number of households to spend all of the budgeted LMI connection funds. Please document that effort via Appendix 1-4-D from the Grants Management Handbook. If you have any questions on modifications or waivers, here is the contact information.